The sky above Geneva split open without warning. One moment, it was a clear spring morning with birds circling over Lake Geneva and tourists snapping photos near the United Nations headquarters. The next, a massive shape blotted out the sun. It wasn't a cloud. It wasn't a plane. It was a ship, smooth, black, and silent, hanging in the air like a thought made real. No engines roared. No exhaust plumes trailed behind it. It just appeared, as if the universe had blinked and placed it there. People on the street stopped walking. Cars slowed to a halt. Even the pigeons seemed to freeze mid-flap. Then a voice filled the air, not from speakers or radios, but inside everyone's head, clear and cold as winter steel. "People of Earth," it said, "you are hereby ordered to surrender your planet. Your governments, your armies, your resources, all will be placed under the authority of the Galactic Conquered. Resistance is illogical. Compliance ensures survival." The message repeated in every language known to humankind, from Mandarin to Swahili to Navajo, each version perfectly pronounced, each tone identical in its calm, emotionless certainty. In Tokyo, office workers stared at their screens. In Nairobi, children playing soccer dropped their ball. In Buenos Aires, a street musician stopped mid-note. For a few heartbeats, the entire world held its breath. But then, in the UN Security Council chamber, Frank Delgado leaned back in his chair and let out a short, dry laugh. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a face that had seen too many sandstorms and too few vacations. He'd served 3 tours overseas before trading his uniform for a diplomat suit, and he'd never lost the habit of sizing up threats with a raised eyebrow and a half-smile. "Well," he said, glancing at the others around the table, "that's one way to introduce yourself." Next to him, Lena Brooks didn't even look up from her tablet. She was in her early 30s with curly brown hair tied back in a messy bun, and glasses slightly crooked on her nose. As the lead astrophysicist assigned to the UN's new Space Observation Initiative, she'd spent the last 2 years tracking strange energy signatures near the Kuiper Belt. She'd suspected something was coming. She just hadn't expected it to be so. "Polite about world domination. They think logic wins every argument," she murmured, tapping a few keys. They've never argued with a human teenager. Outside, the mood shifted fast. At first, fear rippled through crowds. But fear didn't last long on Earth. Not when the alternative was absurdity. Someone in a cafe near the lake posted a shaky video of the ship with the caption, "Aliens here. Do I still have to go to work?" Within minutes, replies flooded in. "Tell them to fill out Form 27B6 first. Ask if they accept Bitcoin. If they want Earth, they gotta deal with my mother-in-law." In New York, a group of college students live-streamed themselves waving a white bedsheet out their dorm window with, "Sure we surrender not," scrawled in marker. In Mumbai, a comedian did an impromptu stand-up set on a street corner. So these guys show up, all shiny and serious, and say, "Give us your planet." "Bro, we can't even agree on pizza toppings." Good luck running this place. The clip went viral before lunch. Back in Geneva, emergency meetings buzzed in hushed tones. Military leaders from dozens of nations connected via secure lines, debating whether to scramble jets or launch missiles. But political leaders hesitated, not out of cowardice, but because something felt off. The aliens hadn't fired a single shot. They hadn't threatened cities. They'd just asked, like a librarian reminding someone to return a book. Frank stood up and walked to the window. The alien ship hung there, motionless, its surface reflecting the city below like a dark mirror. "They don't understand us," he said quietly. "They think surrender is a simple transaction. Hand over the keys, sign the papers, done. But humans don't work that way." Lena joined him, arms crossed. "They scanned our databases, our broadcasts, our internet. They saw our wars, our politics, our reality TV. And they still think we'll roll over." She shook her head. "Either they're arrogant or they've never seen a cat ignore a command." Across the ocean, in a cluttered garage in Houston, Ray Monroe wiped grease off his hands and stared at his phone. He'd been rebuilding an old satellite dish into a backyard radio telescope when the alert popped up. Now he watched a newsfeed showing the Geneva ship. His teenage daughter, Maya, leaned against the doorway eating cereal straight from the box. "Are we doomed, Dad?" she asked, mouth half full. Ray grinned. "No, we're just getting started." He walked over to his workbench and flipped a switch. A bank of monitors lit up, showing data streams from amateur astronomers around the world. If they're broadcasting directly into our heads, that means they're using some kind of neural frequency carrier wave. And if they're using waves, He trailed off, already sketching circuits in his notebook. Then we can talk back. Meanwhile, in a quiet classroom in Columbus, Ohio, Carla Jenkins paused her history lesson when her phone buzzed. She read the headline, then looked at her students, 15 wide-eyed teenagers who'd just been learning about the Cold War. "All right," she said, setting down her chalk. "Pop quiz. If an alien empire shows up and says surrender or die, what do you do?" A boy in the back raised his hand. "Fight?" Carla smiled. "Wrong. You confuse them." She turned to the whiteboard and wrote, "Step 1. Send them a care package. Include hot sauce, a whoopee cushion, and a playlist of 90s boy bands." The class burst out laughing. And in that moment, across continents and cultures, something remarkable happened. Instead of panic, people chose humor. Instead of fear, they chose mockery. Not because they weren't scared, but because laughter was their oldest weapon, sharper than swords and louder than bombs. High above Geneva, the alien ship remained still. Inside its command core, Verketh, envoy of the Galactic Concord, monitored Earth's response. Data streams poured in. Memes, jokes, sarcastic tweets, videos of dogs wearing tiny helmets labeled Earth Defense Force. One clip showed a toddler shaking a rattle at the sky while yelling, "No!" Verketh tilted its smooth, featureless head. "This species does not comply," it reported to its superiors. It laughs. And for the first time in the Concord's 1,000-year history of conquest, uncertainty flickered in its logic circuits. Because how do you conquer a planet that treats your ultimatum like a punchline? The Galactic Concord had never faced anything like Earth. In their long history, every species they encountered followed the same pattern. Show overwhelming force. Issue a clear demand and watch them submit. Logic dictated it. Survival demanded it. But Earth sent a video of a man in a banana costume dancing on a rooftop while holding a sign that read, "Take my Wi-Fi, not my freedom." Verketh, the envoy assigned to oversee Earth's surrender, sat in the command chamber of the flagship Zenthera, hovering now over the Pacific Ocean. Its smooth, obsidian form pulsed faintly with violet light as it reviewed the latest data. Human behavior made no sense. They weren't mobilizing armies. They weren't building weapons, at least not obvious ones. Instead, they were posting recipes for alien-repellent chili, sharing memes of cats wearing tiny helmets, and uploading songs titled, "You Can't Have My Planet, But You Can Have This Mixtape." Back in Houston, Ray Monroe hadn't slept in 36 hours. His garage was now a makeshift lab filled with wires, old circuit boards, and half-empty coffee cups. His daughter Maya helped him solder connections while humming the tune to Bohemian Rhapsody. They'd recovered a small piece of alien tech, a drone fragment that had malfunctioned and crashed near Guam during a brief, confused skirmish. It wasn't much, just a palm-sized disc that hummed when touched. But Ray saw potential. "They think we're primitive," he said, adjusting his goggles. "They scanned our satellites, saw our old rockets, and figured we're still playing with firecrackers." He held up the disc. "But we've been jury-rigging fusion experiments in basements since the 1970s. We don't need fancy gear. We just need a problem to solve." Maya handed him a wrench. "So what's this thing do?" "It's a power regulator," Ray said. "But it runs on something we don't have, some kind of quantum resonance field. Problem is it's unstable. That's why their drone crashed. They over-engineered it." He grinned. "Which means they forgot the most important rule. Keep it simple." While Ray worked, Lena Brooks coordinated a quiet global effort from a secure bunker beneath Geneva. Scientists from Brazil to South Korea shared data through encrypted channels, piecing together how the alien signal worked. They discovered the Concord's messages weren't just sound. They used a low-frequency neural pulse that bypassed ears and spoke directly to the brain. It was brilliant, and as Lena pointed out, brilliantly hackable. She sent instructions to universities and hacker collectives worldwide. Build signal repeaters using old radio parts, microwave transformers, and even karaoke machines. Within days, dozens of laugh stations popped up, from rooftops in Berlin to fishing boats off the coast of Vietnam, broadcasting human voices not in fear, but in joy. One station in Dublin played nothing but Irish pub songs and the sound of people clinking glasses. Another in Lagos streamed stand-up comedy routines in Yoruba and Pidgin English. The effect was subtle but powerful. The Concord's neural pulses began to glitch. Their translators misfired. A formal surrender demand in London came out as Please hand over your planet. Also, your tea is excellent. In Tokyo, an evacuation order sounded like everyone must leave. Unless you have snacks. Firketh grew frustrated. It summoned its science officer, a slender being named Kliss, whose limbs shimmered like liquid silver. Why do they not comply? It asked, its voice flat but edged with something new. Doubt. Kliss bowed slightly. Their neural architecture is chaotic. Emotion overrides logic constantly. They value absurdity as highly as truth. One human broadcast described our ship as a fancy toaster that forgot to toast. That is inaccurate, Firketh said. Yes, Kliss replied. But it made millions laugh. Meanwhile, in Columbus, Ohio, Carla Jenkins turned her classroom project into a movement. After her care package joke went viral, students started assembling real boxes. They filled them with beef jerky, hot sauce packets, glow sticks, rubber ducks, and handwritten notes that said things like, "Welcome to Earth. Rules 1, be kind. 2, don't blow up the moon. 3, try the tacos." They labeled the boxes Earth diplomacy kits and mailed them to embassies, space agencies, and even random addresses they found online that sounded alien, like Zeta Reticuli Fan Club. Arizona. One kid even made it onto a cargo drone the Concord had deployed to scan Earth's surface. The drone returned to the Zenthara, carrying a rubber duck duct taped to its sensor array and a note that read, "This is our ambassador. His name is Quackers. He demands snacks." Firketh stared at the duck. It made no sound. It served no function, and yet it sat there, yellow and unbothered, as if daring the entire Concorde to explain its purpose. In Moscow, a group of retired engineers built a device they called the Joke Jammer. Using old Soviet radar parts and a library of Soviet-era puns, they created a field that scrambled the Concorde's comms with bursts of absurdity. Suddenly, military orders came through as limericks. Deploy fleet to Sector 9. There once was a ship from the Rhine. The Concorde's discipline began to crack. Younger crew members, those who'd never seen a species resist with humor, started asking questions. Why do they not fear us? One whispered. What if they're right to laugh? Back in Houston, Ray finally cracked the alien power regulator. He connected it to a car battery, a microwave transformer, and a speaker from an old boombox. When he flipped the switch, the disc glowed bright blue and emitted a tone that made the garage lights flicker. Maya covered her ears. What is that? That, Ray said, eyes wide with excitement, is the sound of their shield frequency. He recorded it, cleaned it up, and sent it to Lena. Within hours, she had audio engineers across the globe remixing it into music. Not just any music, songs with heavy bass, distorted guitars, and screaming vocals. Because if the aliens used precise frequencies, humans would drown them in noise. The first test came 3 days later. As a Concorde scout ship passed over Chicago, every radio station in the city switched to the same track. A custom-made metal anthem titled, "No Surrender, Just Headbangs." The ship's shields flickered. Its lights dimmed. For 17 seconds, it vanished from radar. In Alaska, pilot Hank Briggs watched the blip disappear on his old military radar screen. He chuckled into his radio. Told ya. Never underestimate a guy with a guitar and a grudge. The Concorde didn't understand. They had weapons that could crack planets, fleets that spanned star systems, logic that had never failed. But Earth didn't fight with logic. It fought with chaos, creativity, and a stubborn refusal to take itself or its invaders too seriously. Firketh stood once more before the view screen, watching Earth spin below. Cities glowed with life. Music drifted up through the atmosphere. Somewhere a child was laughing. And for the first time, the envoy wondered if conquest was even possible here. Not because humans were strong, but because they were unpredictable. And unpredictability, it realized, was the one thing logic could not control. The Concorde had waited long enough. Laughter, memes, and rubber ducks were not signs of weakness, they were signs of defiance. And defiance, in the eyes of the Galactic Concorde, demanded correction. Not with words, but with force. Silent and swift, they launched their enforcers, sleek, insect-like drones that dropped from the underbelly of the Zenthara like black rain. Their mission was simple. Disable Earth's communication networks, shut down power grids, and demonstrate the cost of disobedience. The first wave hit Chicago just after sunrise. People walking to work looked up as dozens of drones hovered over skyscrapers, their smooth surfaces reflecting the morning light. Then, with a soft hum, they released pulses of energy that knocked out cell towers, traffic lights, and subway systems. Panic should have followed. Screams. Chaos. But instead, a group of teenagers in a downtown apartment building did something unexpected. They plugged an old PlayStation into a jury-rigged antenna, opened a game of Drone Hunter $3,000, a title they'd coded themselves over the weekend, and began broadcasting fake control signals. To the Concord's surprise, 3 drones suddenly veered off course, spiraling into Lake Michigan with a splash. The teens high-fived, then live-streamed the whole thing with the caption, "When aliens invade but your Wi-Fi's stronger." In Mumbai, street vendors didn't run. They adapted. Old tandoori ovens, normally used for baking bread, were rewired by local engineers into crude electromagnetic pulse devices. When a drone flew low over a market, a vendor named Ravi flipped a switch hidden beneath his spice rack. A crackle of blue energy shot into the air. The drone sputtered, dropped a few feet, then landed gently in a pile of saffron rice. Ravi picked it up, dusted it off, and placed a tiny marigold on its sensor. "Welcome to India," he said with a wink. News of these small victories spread fast. Not through official channels, those were still down, but through word-of-mouth bicycle messengers and ham radios. In Nairobi, a group of university students built signal mirrors from old soda cans and used them to flash coded messages across rooftops. In Rio, samba drummers created rhythms that mimicked the Concorde's command frequencies, confusing drone navigation systems into thinking they were receiving orders to dance. But the real breakthrough came from Denver, where Lena Brooks had gathered a team of musicians, physicists, and sound engineers in an old concert hall. They'd spent days testing Ray Monroe's discovery, the alien shield frequency, and found something astonishing. The Concorde's energy barriers didn't just block weapons. They resonated like tuning forks, and if you hit them with the right sound at the right pitch, they vibrated uncontrollably. The problem was that pitch wasn't found in nature. It lived in the screech of electric guitars, the crash of cymbals, and the guttural roar of heavy metal vocals. So Lena made a call. Within 24 hours, every major radio station on Earth prepared for Operation Earworm. In London, BBC Radio 1 cleared its schedule. In Sydney, Triple J went silent for a moment, then blasted Metallica's Enter Sandman at full volume. In Nashville, country stations switched to Slayer. Even classical stations joined in, with orchestras playing punk rock covers using violins and tubas. The sound rose like a storm. It poured from car stereos, boomboxes, smartphone speakers, and open windows. It rolled across deserts, echoed through mountains, and climbed into the sky. And when it hit the Concorde fleet, the effect was immediate. On the Zenthara, alarms blared. Firkith gripped the edge of its command console as the ship shuddered violently. Lights flickered. Panels sparked. Outside, drones wobbled mid-air like drunk insects before crashing into fields, rivers, and parking lots. One landed softly in a playground in Oslo, where a group of kids immediately claimed it as a new jungle gym. "What is this noise?" Firkith demanded, its voice strained. Kliss, monitoring the chaos, replied with awe, "It is music. But not for pleasure. It is weaponized dissonance. They are attacking our shields with joy." Back in Houston, Ray watched the global feed with Maya by his side. Drone after drone went dark on the map. "They thought sound was just for talking," he said, grinning. "They forgot humans use it to feel alive." In Alaska, Hank Briggs took advantage of the confusion. Flying his old Cessna with a homemade radar jammer strapped to the wing, he led a squadron of bush pilots in a low-altitude dance over the Arctic Circle. They didn't carry missiles, just flares, smoke canisters, and speakers blasting Johnny Cash. The Concorde drones, overwhelmed by conflicting signals and sonic interference, lost formation and drifted harmlessly into snowdrifts. Hank landed near one, walked up, and stuck a "Gone Fishin' sign on its side before flying off. The Concorde had never faced a war like this. There were no armies in formation, no generals giving orders. Just ordinary people using what they had, old tech, street smarts, and a deep belief that no one, not even aliens, got to tell them how to live. A grandmother in Seoul used her rice cooker to fry a drone circuit board. A fisherman in Portugal lured one into his net with a blinking lure and kept it as a garden ornament. In Cairo, a street artist painted a mural of the Concorde ship wearing sunglasses and holding an ice cream cone. Captioned, "Cool it, space bro." Firketh watched it all from orbit, its logic circuits straining. This was not warfare. This was improvisation, and improvisation had no rules, no patterns, no weaknesses to exploit. Every time the Concorde adapted, Earth changed the game. Then came the final blow, not from a weapon, but from a voice. Lena Brooks stepped onto a rooftop in Geneva, holding a simple microphone connected to a global emergency broadcast channel. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She just spoke calm and clear over the fading echoes of guitar solos. "You came here thinking we'd kneel," she said, "but we don't kneel. We build, we laugh. We share hot sauce with strangers and teach our kids to question everything, even you. You want our planet? Fine, but you'll have to live with us. And trust me, that's the real challenge." Her words spread across every working speaker on Earth. In homes, in cars, in shelters, and subway tunnels, people heard her and nodded. They weren't soldiers. They were bakers, teachers, mechanics, artists. And together, they'd just defended their world not with fear, but with stubborn, joyful humanity. On the Zenthara, silence fell. The music had stopped. The drones were grounded. And for the first time, Firketh understood. Earth could not be conquered. Not because it was strong, but because it refused to play by the rules of conquest at all. The conquered did not retreat. They did not fire back. They simply paused. For 3 full days, the Zenthara hung motionless over the Pacific, its black hull absorbing sunlight like a stone in deep water. No more drones fell from its belly. No more cold voices spoke inside human minds. The silence was louder than any threat. On Earth, people didn't celebrate. They waited. They watched the skies, not with fear, but with quiet curiosity. In Geneva, Frank Delgado stood on the roof of the UN building, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. He'd seen enough wars to know that silence after battle often meant something bigger was coming. But this silence felt different, less like the calm before a storm and more like someone thinking hard. Lena Brooks, still in Denver, noticed something strange in the data streams. The alien ship wasn't powering down. It wasn't preparing to leave. It was listening. Its sensors, once scanning for weapons and military bases, now focused on city centers, schools, parks, and concert halls. It recorded children laughing in Tokyo, street musicians in Paris, a grandmother singing lullabies in Lagos. The Concorde wasn't studying Earth's defenses anymore. They were studying its soul. Then a message came, not as a command, but as a question. It appeared on every working screen on the planet, simple and plain. "Why do you not surrender?" Frank read it and smiled. He called an emergency session, not of generals, but of teachers, artists, chefs, and kids. "They're asking," he told the group, "not demanding. That means they're ready to hear an answer." The answer didn't come from a government. It came from everywhere at once. In New Orleans, a jazz band played a live set on a riverboat and beamed it into the sky. In Mexico City, a chef cooked a feast for 100 strangers and filmed every bite. In Reykjavik, a poet read verses about stars and second chances. And in Columbus, Ohio, Carla Jenkins gathered her students to write a letter, not on paper, but as a video. They held up signs that said, "We don't want to fight. We want to share. Try our pizza. Watch our sunsets. Meet our dogs." Frank watched the video and knew what to do. He didn't draft a treaty. He didn't send soldiers. He sent an offer. Standing before a single camera in Geneva, he spoke plainly, hands in his pockets like he was talking to a neighbor over a fence. "You asked us to surrender," he said, "but we don't give up our home. What we will do is this: trade with you, learn from you, show you what it means to be human, not just the wars, but the jokes, the songs, the way we help strangers in the rain. We'll give you our coffee if you give us your star maps. We'll teach you how to dance if you teach us how to heal faster. But no more orders, no more threats, just talk." The message went out, and this time the Concorde didn't ignore it. A week later, something no one expected happened. A small shuttle detached from the Zenthara and descended, not toward a military base or capital city, but toward a university in Montreal. On board was not a soldier, but a young Concord scientist named Trell. It carried no weapons, only a datapad and a request. "I wish to study human joy. May I stay?" The world held its breath. Governments debated. Scientists argued. But students at the university just opened the gates and said, "Welcome." Trell was tall and slender with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that shimmered like oil on water. At first it moved stiffly, speaking in precise formal sentences, but within days it was seen sitting on the grass watching students play frisbee. It tried ice cream and nearly short-circuited from the cold. It attended a comedy show and, after a long pause, made a sound that the humans decided was laughter. Back on the Zenthera, Verketh watched the feeds from Trell's sensors. It saw humans sharing food without asking for payment. It saw them crying at movies, then hugging strangers afterward. It saw them argue fiercely, then buy each other coffee the next day. None of it made logical sense. And yet, it worked. Earth was messy, loud, and full of contradictions, but it held together. Verketh made a decision. It sent a new message to Earth, this time not to governments, but to everyone. The Galactic Concord withdraws its demand for surrender. We propose instead a cultural exchange. Share your ways. We will share ours. The response was instant. Not with suspicion, but with open arms. Ray Monroe in Houston offered to help repair the downed drones, not to weaponize them, but to turn them into weather monitors. Carla Jenkins started Earth Flavor Kits, small boxes filled with local snacks, seeds, music playlists, and handwritten notes in dozens of languages. The first batch was beamed up to the Zenthera via drone. Inside one box, someone had tucked a tiny plush octopus with a note, "For when you feel tangled." In Geneva, Frank met with diplomats from every nation. They didn't draft a war treaty. They drafted a friendship pact. No borders in space. No ownership of planets. Just open doors, shared knowledge, and a promise. If either side ever needed help, they'd ask, not take. Lena Brooks stood beside him as the final document was signed. "We didn't win a war," she said softly. "We made a friend." Above them, the Zenthera began to glow, not with weapons charging, but with soft, warm light. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Then from its hull it released a small satellite. Not a bomb, not a spy device. It broadcast a single sound into Earth's atmosphere. The Concord's version of laughter. It sounded like wind through crystal trees, strange but kind. People looked up and smiled. Kids waved. Musicians played welcome songs. And somewhere in Alaska, Hank Briggs toasted the sky with a thermos of coffee. The Concord had come expecting slaves. They found partners. And Earth, as always, just kept being Earth. Loud, kind, messy, and full of surprises. 6 months after the Concorde withdrew its demand, Earth was not the same, but not because it had been conquered. It had changed because it had opened its doors. The black ships still hovered in orbit, but now they carried traders, students, and curious tourists instead of soldiers. The first official Concorde visitor to land in Las Vegas didn't ask for surrender papers. He asked where to get the best cheeseburger. His name was Yorv, a young Concorde engineer with a fascination for human, illogical pleasures. He spent 3 days in Vegas eating pancakes at 3 a.m., losing fake money at slot machines, and trying to understand why humans paid to ride spinning machines that made them dizzy. When asked what he liked most, he pointed to a street performer playing a saxophone and said, "This noise makes my circuits feel warm." Cities around the world began to adapt in small, joyful ways. In Tokyo, vending machines now offered Concorde-approved snacks, mostly crunchy seaweed and glowing blue fruit that tasted like mint and starlight. In Rio, samba schools added alien-inspired rhythms to their drums, creating a new sound that made even the Concorde diplomats tap their feet. In Cairo, a cafe opened called 2 Moons, where humans and Concorde visitors shared mint tea and tried to teach each other games. The Concorde always lost at chess, but they were unbeatable at staring contests. In Denver, Ray Monroe and Lena Brooks stood side by side in front of a newly built dome-shaped building, with solar panels and shimmering alien alloy walls. This was the Earth Alien Innovation Hub, the first joint research center of its kind. Inside, human engineers and Concorde scientists worked together on clean fusion reactors, zero-gravity gardens, and a device that could translate emotions into light patterns. Ray often joked that the hardest part wasn't the science. It was convincing the Concorde that coffee breaks were essential to good thinking. Lena spent her mornings testing new communication methods. She discovered that while the Concorde didn't laugh like humans, they responded strongly to rhythm and color. So she replaced formal reports with animated stories set to drum beats. One presentation about water purification became a 5-minute light dance, that left the Concord team buzzing with excitement. They don't need data, she told Ray. They need feeling wrapped in facts. Back in Columbus, Carla Jenkins' classroom had become an unofficial embassy for young Concord learners. Her students taught alien children how to draw, tell jokes, and fold paper cranes. In return, the Concord kids showed them how to grow glowing plants that cleaned the air and sang soft songs when touched. One day, a Concord child gave Carla a small seed that bloomed into a flower shaped like a smiling face. She kept it on her desk and it never wilted. Frank Delgado, now Earth's first official ambassador to the Concord, kept his office simple. No flags, no medals, just a wooden desk, a coffee maker, and a framed photo on the wall. It showed the day the Xanthera first appeared over Geneva. Beneath it, in his own handwriting, was the caption, "The day they asked us to kneel, and we sent them a meme." He received visitors daily. Concord scholars, Earth diplomats, even curious kids who wanted to see an alien up close. He never gave long speeches. He just made tea, asked questions, and listened. The secret, he once told a reporter, isn't being strong. It's being human enough to make others want to understand you. Trade flourished in unexpected ways. Earth sent music, books, seeds, and chocolate. The Concord sent star charts, medical nanites that healed cuts in seconds, and a fabric that changed color with your mood. A fashion brand in Milan made jackets from it, and suddenly everyone wanted to wear their feelings on their sleeves. Literally. Tourism boomed, too. Concord citizens booked trips to watch sunsets in Santorini, hike the Grand Canyon, and eat street food in Bangkok. They couldn't taste spice the way humans did, but they loved the heat sensation and often returned home with tiny bottles of hot sauce as souvenirs. One Concord tourist in New Orleans accidentally joined a second-line parade and ended up dancing through the French Quarter with a trumpet in hand. The video got millions of views on both Earth and Concord networks. Not everything was perfect. There were misunderstandings. A Concord attempt to optimize traffic flow in Berlin led to all cars moving in perfect silence for a day, until humans rebelled by honking horns and playing car radios at full volume. The Concord learned quickly. Efficiency wasn't always better than chaos, and humans made mistakes too. A group in Texas tried to teach Concord visitors how to ride bulls. It did not go well, but everyone laughed, no one was hurt, and the Concord filed it under important human rituals to observe from a distance. The biggest change was invisible but deep. People stopped looking at the stars with fear. They looked with hope. Kids dreamed not just of being astronauts, but of being translators, chefs for alien guests, or gardeners who grew food for two worlds. Schools added interspecies communication to their curriculums. Libraries stocked books in both human languages and Concord glyphs. One evening, Frank stood on his balcony in Geneva, watching the Xanthera glow softly in the night sky. Next to him, a young Concord intern named Mira sipped herbal tea and watched the city lights below. "Your world is loud," she said. "But it feels full." Frank nodded. "We don't have all the answers, but we share what we have. That's enough." Mira tilted her head. "On our world, silence meant order. Here, noise means life." They stood in comfortable quiet for a while, two beings from different stars united not by force but by choice. Below them, a street musician played a slow jazz tune. Somewhere, a child laughed. And high above, the stars watched as they always had, but now with a little more warmth. Humanity never surrendered. They just invited the galaxy in, and in doing so found they weren't alone anymore.